Hello everyone. Welcome to this session of my course. It's an NPTEL course, as you already know, Appreciation to Linguistics, or basically the title is Appreciating Linguistics, a Typological Approach. If you, what I have been always repeating anytime, like in all of my classes, is that the primary objective of this course is to make you aware that linguistics as a discipline should be appreciated, and there are multiple ways by which you can appreciate this discipline. Typological approach is one of them. We already had a brief discussion on what is typology, and then what are the primary objectives of a typologist, and then how to identify what language belongs to what type. Very briefly we have discussed about it, and then in the due course of time, when we proceed further for the lectures, you will get to know more about typology. But if you check the syllabus, after the introductory sessions get over, I have units like morphological typology, phonological typology, syntactic typology, then we have semantic typology, and finally we have pragmatic typology. So all these sub-contained, like all these sub-units of this course titled as Appreciating Linguistics will have certain contents related to the sub-domains of linguistics as a discipline. So when I say sub-domains, one major domain that linguistics as a course that deals with is morphology. So I am going to talk about morphology today, just a very brief introduction about what is morphology, and then we'll in the next lecture, or maybe a couple of lectures after this, we'll move to morphological typology. So why I'm bringing in morphology here? Primarily I want you to know what morphology is. I assume a lot of you would be familiar with this, those who have already had some basic level or like fundamental level courses or sort of foundation courses in linguistics, you must be aware about it, but then there is no harm in refreshing the memory when you are talking about linguistics. So if you are new to linguistics as a discipline, this unit is going to help you immensely, and if you have already had some basic information about linguistics, then I'll help you to recall what all you have studied in morphology. So my question here would be, what is morphology? So that's what I'm going to address this class, and then further I am going to talk about the morphological typology. So how many of you know what morphology is? I am sure those who have had some basic information about linguistics, you would know that morphology is that part of linguistics or that domain of linguistics which deals with the study of words. So but if you ask me what is the root word of morphology, then I would say that this is not really the study of words, rather this is the study of morphemes. But not everyone knows what a morpheme is, because morpheme is a word which is a jargon. Unless you are aware about this discipline specific terms, it's not easy for you to know what a morpheme is, because that's a technical term, that's a linguistic specific jargon. So to begin with, we'll find out how to approach morphology as a discipline, or sorry, morphology as a part of linguistics. So let's take it up from here. Morphology is the study of, or instead of just saying study, is a systematic study or scientific study of words used in a sentence. So I would ask you the first question is that, what do you think when you speak a language, when you utter long constructions I mean the sentences, what do you think, what is the most fundamental unit of a language? What should be the most rudimentary one or the most basic one? So what do you think? I'm sure most of you would give me the answer that it's word. And how to break the word into many parts, that's the story that I'm going to tell you now. But otherwise, for a lay person, if I ask you what is the basic thing in a sentence, or what is the most rudimentary thing in a sentence, then the first answer I predict is word. Correct me if you think I'm not right, but I think I'm right. So it's going to be the word. So that's the most fundamental unit of a language, which can be spoken, which can be written also. So the speech and writing, we'll talk about it later, but then as of now, just let's focus on the words, the way you speak. So my concern here is that you need to understand a morpheme before you really understand morphological typology. And to understand what a morpheme is, you need to start it with the concept called word. So let's find out what is the traditional or the conventional definition that you have about word. I'm sure kind of you have been studying multiple languages, and English is surely one of them, which is one of the most widely studied languages in the world. And you have been a student of English language, if not literature, been a while. Ever since you have started going to school, English has been with you. So all these years of English grammar studies, English language studies, or for that matter literature studies, what do you think? What is a word? How would you define it? So this is the question I should expect you to answer in the simplest form. And if I recall how I was taught when I was a young school going child, a word is primarily the collection of a few letters which will have some meaning. Am I right? So that's what we have been taught what a word is. So in this case, I would say this sounds to be a justified definition for a word called word, but it may not be sufficient, because at least in a language like English, we have words which do not have many letters. There's simply one letter. So can you tell me what it should be? Like what is that word which has only one letter? I'm sure without any worries or without any doubt, everybody is going to tell me, okay, there's a word called I, which is the first person singular number. So the letter I is also a word, and if it is a word, then the definition need to change a bit. So how we are going to change the definition, or how we are going to understand it descriptively following the linguistic tools, we are going to check it a little later. But remember, the words could be a set of letters, it could also be just one letter. But what is most important, it should have a complete meaning. It must have some meanings. Just the random arrangement of letters are not going to contribute to make it a word. If I write C and then a D and after that I am writing Z, then I am writing S, that does not make any word. So to write or to create a word using letters, or to form a word using letters, you have to arrange it, or you have to put it in such a way that this will give you some meaning. That's why CAP is going to be a word, but CPP may not be a word in English. And similar is the case with many of the other languages in the world. I would bring in a lot of English examples because that's the lingua franca, and then I assume most like the medium of instruction is also English. So I would definitely give you examples from English, but I would expect you to understand your own language. So when I say a single letter can also make a word, why don't you think about, is the definition true for your language? Do you think there is a word in your language which comprises of only one letter? So do think about it and then let me know. This might be an assignment question for you later. But for sure in English, we have at least the letter I, so which can be a word. Then the concern here, like we will shift our attention to other aspects of morphology in your own language. So I would give you the examples from English, a couple of other examples from other languages, but eventually it should be you who should be able to analyze the data from your own language. And when I say own language, I am talking about your first language or your native language, which you are most comfortable with. Could be. I am not saying that you must be comfortable with it, but you could be quite comfortable using this language in the day-to-day discourse. Plus, the other thing is that you should have an intuition. So intuition is the key here. Intuition is actually important when you are thinking about linguistics as a discipline. So if I say CPP is not an English word, the native speaker of English would find it weird. But you never know what the other, so we have all these spelling problems or the spelling mistakes that we do as non-native speakers of English, but very unlikely these kinds of mistakes are going to be made by your native speaker. So, the native speaker will have an intuition to share with the world that this is a word or this particular combination of letters could actually contribute to the making of a word. So, that is what I expect you to do when I give you some assignments. So, think about your own language and think about the words that you use in your language. And with this information, let us move to the next point. What do you think, why words are important in any given language? So, words are important, they will always be important, because they say that the work that can be done using words may not be done using the words. So, words are definitely more important or more relevant than the war. So, war, and there are also words like the war of words. So, when you have the war of words, primarily what you are going to do, you are engaged in a loaded debate that talks about the heated discussions, or that deals with the heated discussions, and then there has been a lot of argument and counter argument. You are giving your own views, then the other person is also giving his or her counter opinion about it. So, that is what we say, war of words. So, words are the tools which can be used in a creative way to bring newness or novelty in your speech. So, it all boils down to the words. So, how you play around with the words, that decides what is your creativity. The better the patterns, more creative you are as a person. So, I hope I am clear to all of you. So, if you think you know many words in a particular language, then your speech becomes more smooth. That means you don't fumble, you don't really falter while speaking. So, the more words you have, better speech you should actually have. So, in this connection or in this context, I would say words are extremely important in the human being's speech to use the language in a creative manner. So, it brings you creativity. The right kind of words for the right situation makes you a good speaker. Let us say you have some idea in your mind, but then you are not able to express it in a given language. That means you do not have enough words to use them to express your ideas or views or opinions. So, in that case, I would say words are actually very important when you are trying to speak a particular language. So, obviously, the next immediate question comes to you is that, what do you think, how many words do we know? I am not going to give you the answer, you think about it. And before that, probably I would ask you, how many languages do you speak? And considering we are in India, most primarily, like what I assume that most of my viewers are from India. So, what do you think, we being Indians are multilingual, or we just speak one or two languages? So, bilingual, monolingual or multilingual. So, when I say monolingual, primarily we are speaking one language, and when I say bilingual, we are speaking two languages, and when we say multilingual or plurilingual also you can use, we are using many languages at the same time with equal ease, with equal proficiency, with equal comfort, with equal confidence. So, these are the words I would use to consider you as a multilingual. So, how many of you, so that is the question you need to think about it. Do you think you are a monolingual speaker, or you are a bilingual speaker, or you are a multilingual speaker? And whatever languages you are speaking, whatever might be the number, what do you think, how many words do you have for each of the languages that you speak? Let us say, I will give you my own example. I am an Odia speaker. Odia is an Eastern Indo-Aryan language, that is my first language. Then I also speak English almost like a native speaker. So, we call it near native fluency. I do speak Indian variety of English, or Indian English you can say, as you can hear from my speech. So, I am equally comfortable in English, plus I also speak in Hindi almost like a native speaker. So, in that case I am surely a multilingual, because I can switch easily among these three languages. While speaking Odia, I can move to Hindi if I encounter a Hindi speaker, then I can quickly switch to English if the other person who I am communicating with is an English speaker. So, do you think you are also multilingual like me? And if you think you are a multilingual speaker or you know multiple languages, so what do you think, how many words do we actually know? So, do come back with some statistics, consider it as an assignment and find out the information how many words you actually know for each language that you speak. But having said that, one thing I would safely predict that no matter whatever might be the vocabulary size that you have, you might have a huge number of words in the repository, or you might be using a limited number of let us say limited number of permutations and combinations of letters, which would be eventually considered as words. So, that is definitely finite. So, the vocabulary or the words that you have in your repository, and what repository? This is the mental repository or the lexicon that you have. So, whatever you have, that is limited or that is definite, but when or that is kind of finite number of sets of vocabulary that you have in your lexicon. But using those finite set of words or finite set of vocabulary, you can actually express or you can actually talk about infinite number of expressions. So, human emotion and human expression, that is infinite in number. So, with just a handful, or I will not say handful, we will just set with just a set of finite vocabulary, you can actually create or you can actually communicate or express multiple expressions or multiple emotions at various situations. So, that is how the vocabulary is important or the words are important. You are not playing around with the sentences much, because sentences are in a way a bit rigid for most of the languages, which we have already discussed in the word order section of this course. We did talk about languages which have free word order, languages which have fixed word order. English, for example, is a fixed word order language. It generally does not move its phrases freely to many places. On the other hand, Indian languages like Hindi or Odia or Bangla, these are primarily free word order languages. We have a default system, that for sure, but then we can actually play around with our words. So, there is a certain possibility up to which we can extend our freeness. So, this free word order has a certain limit, but using those number of words, you can actually express multiple emotions, multiple expressions and multiple situations. So, though the sentences are a bit rigid or the sentences are a little less flexible, choice of words or use of words for expressing different opinions or different emotions or different expressions, that is infinite. Your emotions are infinite, your vocabulary is finite, but look at the power of the vocabulary that you have. With just a limited set of words that you have in your mental lexicon, you are actually able to explain so much of expressions. So, that is why we need to study morphology carefully, we need to study the words carefully. So, and that's a reason why if you look at the last point of the slide, it is written human vocabulary is dynamic. So, you can add new words, you can delete the ones which are no more in use, you can also expand the vocabulary. So, a particular word which has a meaning X could be extended to the meaning X, Y and Z. So, it might include broader definitions or the broader terms in that sense. So, that is why human vocabulary is surely dynamic in certain senses. Okay? But then before we really understand morphology as a context, a couple of discipline specific jargons I am going to use. So, there is a point here which is written open ended vocabulary that contributes to our creativity. So, I just mentioned that words are the tools which will help us to be creative. That is why I am not sure about you, but at least I do use very frequently this particular phrase, play around with the words. So, when I say play around with the words, try to use the words in different ways, different manners, so that you can express your thoughts or your opinions or your ideas in a more creative manner. You can write better, you can speak better, your language skills are going to be improved if you have that ability to play around with the words. Here I would like to introduce two discipline specific terms to you. One is vocabulary, which are open ended, and then there is the other category of vocabulary which are closed ended, or we can say open class versus closed class vocabulary. So, I will give you the examples later in detail, but as of now just briefly I will tell you the open class vocabulary, they can be added, deleted and expanded. Let us say if I give you the example of a word, let us say Taliban. So, when we use Taliban as a word in English lexicon, Taliban, it is a new addition, it is a noun. Let us say the Talibans are creating havoc in this particular area. So, in that case we are saying Taliban as a word, it was not a part of English lexicon until and unless Talibans existed. So, that is a new word which has come into existence. Similarly, we can also give a few Indian words for that matter. Let's talk about the word like ghee. So, ghee, the spelling of ghee is Ghee. This primarily, what is it? If you look at or if you try to figure out what ghee could mean, this is mainly clarified butter. So, but the clarified butter would be a little different when you try to associate with ghee in an Indian context. So, in an Indian context, ghee is always ghee. Ghee is not going to be considered as clarified butter, though etymologically or content wise it is the same thing that you are talking about. So, this culture has a different name for it, the other culture has a different name for it. So, these are the open class words or the open ended words which might be added, deleted or expanded on the basis of the necessity of a particular culture that it belongs to. However, there are words like prepositions for that matter. Let us say on, over, behind, between, under. So, these are the words, they are extremely rigid and they follow a limited set of vocabulary, or they follow in the vocabulary or in the lexicon, the number is finite and you cannot generally, in most of the cases, you just can't alter them. You can't say okay onto and ont is sufficient, like it is okay if I do not write onto, rather I would write ont and I would read it as onto. That does not really make much sense. So, the number of prepositions that remain or that has always remained constant in any given language. So, some other examples like conjunctions, and, but, or, these are also certain words which have a specific number in the lexicon. So, this lexicon or this specificity or this rigidity that this category of words they follow, that would be or they would be known as closed class vocabulary. So, one is the open class, the other one is the closed class. Open class vocabulary brings a lot of creativity. Closed class vocabulary, they can be used in different creative expressions, but they themselves are not addable or deletable or expandable, if I can create such words like that. So, so here I would say if I look around in English lexicon, the different kinds of parts of speeches that we have, the nouns, the pronouns, then verbs, adverbs, adjectives, prepositions, conjunctions and interjections, some of them are open class and some of them are closed class. I just gave you an example for a preposition and conjunction thing, which are closed class words. Nouns and adjectives and verbs, they would definitely be in the category of open class words, because you can always create new words and these new words can be nouns, they can be verbs and they can be adjectives. So, a very like campus specific example I would give, there are or the internet specific example, Google. When I say I googled and I couldn't find anything about it in a discussion. So, in that case, when Google has become a verb now, so nobody would say I yahooed it or nobody would say I don't know what are the other search engines, Opera maybe, I Operaed it. Nobody is going to do that. But rather people would say I Googled it. So, Google as a word, it has been synonymous with the search engines. So, please Google it and then let me know what is the information available about a particular statement. So, if I ask you, okay, please go back after you finish my lecture and then try to Google what are the new words that have recently been added in English lexicon. So, the use of the word Google itself is also bringing a lot of creativity. So, since this is an open class word, I could actually created constructions like Googled or Googling. Googling also I can say, while that sounds weird, but then I think it can be used in certain specific discourses. So, that is all about the open class and closed class words. For the adjectives also we do definitely create varieties of adjectives to emphasize the quality of a particular thing. So, when we say this is fantastic, so fantastic and fabulous we try to put them together and we said fantabulous. So, that is also new adjective. So, what you did? You got a part from one word fantastic, then the other part from the other word fabulous, and you put them together and you created a new adjective. So, since it is an adjective and it is a new one, you consider it as a creative expression or as a creativity of yours. Similar is the case like Google. Google as a verb and Google as a noun, these are also the creative, this says the creative expression of your thinking ability, of your language usage. Anyway, so that is about the open class and closed class words. All that I want to say is that words are extremely important to understand the linguistics related issues, definitions, or for that matter any discussion that has even feebly connected with linguistics. So, if you do not know linguistics, then it is going to be a problem for you.